This is a story you'll definitely want to hear to the very end. Chapter 1: The Rejected Goddess. Barbara, a stately woman in the prime of her life, was accustomed to admiring glances and unwavering male attention. Her appearance was her primary currency, and her belief in her own irresistibility was an unshakable asset. Since her divorce, her country house had become a small theater where she was the lead actress and her guests were an appreciative audience. And of course, in this theater, there was no room for failure. Therefore, when her son-in-law Victor dared to reject her, Barbara's universe was shaken. It all began when her daughter Laura and her husband Mike came for the weekend. The house always came to life with his arrival. Mike was a jack of all trades, a handyman for hire without a price tag. He fixed outlets, tied up grapevines, patched the roof, all with unwavering calm and good nature. Barbara watched him, and a cunning plan began to form in her mind. When her daughter went to the store, leaving them alone, she decided to act. "Mikey," she called, leaning languidly against the door frame in a robe scented with expensive perfume. "Could you take a look in my bedroom? Something seems to be wrong in there, with the wiring, I think." Mike, without looking up from repairing an old garden pump, nodded. "Sure, Barbara, I'll just finish up here." When he entered the bedroom, Barbara was already sitting on the bed, feigning languor. The curtains were drawn, and the air was thick with a heady fragrance. "I'm so lonely in this big house, Mike," she whispered, smoothing her hair. "Laura never spends any time with me." Mike, completely unfazed, carefully inspected the chandelier, then began to examine the outlet. He saw the world through the prism of functionality. Everything had a purpose. And in his system of values, his mother-in-law was his wife's mother, someone to be respected, not seduced. He finished with the outlet and turned to her, already heading for the door. "Everything's fine, Barbara. The contact was a bit loose. I tightened it." Barbara, enraged by his blindness, stood up and approached him, trying to embrace him. "Mike, you're so strong, so reliable." Her voice was full of feigned adoration, but Mike, politely but firmly, pulled away. "Barbara, I love your daughter very much, and I have a lot of respect for you, but you're my wife's mother." These words were like a death sentence for Barbara. She wasn't just rejected, she was relegated to a relative, an untouchable, sacred figure. For a woman who was used to seeing men as nothing but admirers, this was a devastating blow. "Get out," she hissed. Mike, not understanding the reason for her sudden anger, shrugged and left. The thought running through his head was that he must have offended her somehow. He'd have to ask Laura what gift to get her to make amends. Barbara, however, was left alone, trembling with humiliation. Her beautiful face was contorted with fury. Her vanity, her pride, her goddess-like persona had been trampled. She had to have revenge. It would be cold as steel and as inevitable as fate. Chapter 2: The Broken Leg Plan. After the humiliating rejection, Barbara couldn't settle down. Revenge became her sole purpose. She meticulously thought through her plan and concluded that physical pain was the best way to punish her presumptuous son-in-law. If he wouldn't succumb to her charms, at least he could hop around on one leg. The next day, as Mike was engrossed in fixing the broken lock on the garden gate, Barbara began the first act of her vengeful play. She entered the house, holding a light bulb, and with the most innocent expression, addressed her son-in-law. "Mikey, could you help me? The light bulb in the hallway is burnt out. I'm completely helpless without you, and waiting for an electrician would take a whole week." Mike, immediately putting down his tools, hurried to help. In the hallway, a scene carefully staged by Barbara awaited him. A rickety old stool stood beneath the ceiling light. Its legs were loose, and one was barely holding on. It was on this stool that Barbara was counting, hoping that her son-in-law, without looking, would stand on it, fall, and break his leg. "Here, Mike," she said, pointing to the stool. "Just be careful. It's a bit old." But Mike, a professional handyman, immediately noticed the flaw. He walked up to the stool and inspected it carefully, not even thinking of climbing it. He touched it, wiggled it, and his face took on a serious expression. "Barbara, you've been using this? It's dangerous," he exclaimed, grabbing the stool. "It would have fallen apart under you. The legs are loose, everything needs to be re-glued and reinforced." Without another word, he carried the stool to his workshop. For Barbara, this was the last straw. She stood in the hallway, watching her cunning plan fall apart. Not only was her son-in-law unharmed, but he was also going to fix the very tool of her revenge. "What do you know, Mike?" she snapped, irritated. "This is a perfectly sturdy stool. It's 100 years old and nothing will happen to it." To prove her point, she grabbed the stool back, put it in place, and groaning, climbed onto it. "There, see?" she declared triumphantly, raising her hand. "Nothing will happen to it." It was at that very moment that one of the loose legs snapped with a crack. Barbara, losing her balance, screamed and fell, awkwardly extending her arm to brace her fall. A loud snap echoed through the house. Mike, rushing out of his workshop, found her lying on the floor, groaning in pain. "Barbara, what have you done?" he exclaimed, rushing to her side. At the hospital, where Mike immediately took her, the diagnosis was grim: a broken left arm. Her plans for revenge on her son-in-law had backfired. She lay in the ward with a cast on her arm, feeling humiliated and defeated. Mike, who didn't leave her side for a moment, felt guilty and kept repeating, "I told you the stool was broken." These words, spoken with sincere concern, only fueled the fire of revenge within her. Chapter 3: The Sauna Seduction Plan. The cast on her left arm did not break Barbara's fighting spirit. It only ignited her desire for revenge with renewed force. She was now like an ancient warrior, wounded but not defeated. Her arsenal now included new aces: her weakness and helplessness, which she believed would elicit sympathy and a desire to help from her son-in-law. She decided to use them in a new plan, one as cunning as the first, but much more sophisticated. This time, the goal wasn't physical injury, but seduction, which was meant to be a kind of moral fall for Mike. The idea came to her during Laura's visit. Her daughter, concerned for her mother's health, suggested going to the sauna to warm her bones and relax her muscles. Barbara immediately seized on the thought. "Laura, I can't. My arm is broken," she purred. "Mikey, maybe you could help? You could heat up the sauna and then look after me? I'm so afraid of being alone in the hot steam room. And you're so strong." Mike, who was busy building a new bookshelf, immediately agreed. He was a man of action, and any request for help he took literally. He saw nothing in his mother-in-law's request but a genuine desire for assistance. "Of course, Barbara, don't worry," he said with a smile. "I'll look after you." The next day, he heated up the sauna. The scent of oak branches filled the air, and the steam was so thick you could practically swim in it. Barbara, dressed in a light robe, entered the steam room. There, amidst the clouds of steam, she once again felt young and desirable. She lay on the bench, feigning languor and weakness. "Oh, Mike, I feel so bad. My head is spinning from the heat, but I love it so much." Mike, who was sitting next to her on the lower bench, watched her condition carefully. He saw that she was sweating and might not be feeling well. There were no other thoughts in his head except one: how to help a person who was unwell. He looked at her flushed face, her rapid breathing, and without thinking twice, made what he believed was the only right decision. "Barbara, I'll be right back," he exclaimed. He jumped up, grabbed a large wooden bucket, quickly filled it with ice-cold water from a tank, and, walking up to Barbara, poured its contents directly on her. "There, Barbara, that'll bring you around." Barbara, who had been expecting a completely different outcome, shrieked from the cold. The icy water instantly enveloped her body, causing a shock. She jumped up, shivering from the cold, and ran out of the steam room. Instead of a languid seduction, she got an icy shower and, as a result, a severe cold. Mike, who didn't understand what had happened, looked at her in confusion.
"Barbara, I just wanted to help. I thought you were feeling bad." But his words only made his mother-in-law angrier. She stood in the middle of the changing room, wet, shivering, with a broken arm, feeling her revenge backfire once again. She sneezed, coughed, and swore to herself that her next attempt would be the most decisive and cruelest yet. Chapter 4. The Barbecue Arson Plan. Barbara lay in bed with a fever, a cough, and a cast on her arm. But even this condition couldn't break her will for revenge. She lay awake at night, plotting a new plan that would finally punish her son-in-law. She decided that she was done with half measures, done with these games. Now she would act with certainty. Her new plan was cunning and simple. She knew that Mike was going to have a barbecue, and she decided to use this opportunity to set up an accident that would look like a simple mistake. The plan was as follows. She would discreetly splash him with lighter fluid, and when he lit the barbecue, she would toss a spark. He was supposed to slip, fall, and get burned, or maybe something worse. The next day, when Mike had already lit the coals in the grill, Barbara, wrapped in a warm robe, came out onto the patio. She was weak but determined. In her right hand, she held a bottle of lighter fluid. Her plan was simple, and she thought flawless. "Mikey, I just wanted some fresh air. I came to see how you were doing." Mike, as always, smiled. "Barbara, go rest. I'll take care of everything here myself." But Barbara wasn't going to give up. She walked up to the grill, squinting her eyes. Mike, busy with the coals, wasn't paying attention to her. This was her chance. She leaned over to discreetly splash the fluid at his feet. But at that very moment, she was overcome by another bout of sneezing. "Achoo!" Barbara sneezed so loudly and forcefully that the bottle of lighter fluid slipped from her hands. The stream of flammable liquid, instead of landing on the ground, flew sideways. It flew past Mike and landed squarely on the new, expensive wooden porch swing that her son-in-law had recently built for her. It was her favorite swing, the one she loved so much. Mike, not understanding what had happened, turned to her to see if she was okay. And at that moment, Barbara, trying to keep her balance, waved her hand, and a lit match she was holding, just in case, flew out of her hand. The match fell onto the swing. A huge column of fire instantly engulfed the swing. The flames consumed it, turning it into a giant torch. Barbara, watching this, screamed in horror. Mike, seeing the fire, didn't panic. He grabbed a bucket of water and threw it on the burning swing. "Barbara, what have you done?" he exclaimed. Barbara, who was standing nearby, couldn't believe her eyes. Her revenge had backfired on her once again. Not only had she failed to harm her son-in-law, but she had also burned down her favorite swing, the very one he had made for her. She stood there, shivering, with a broken arm, a cold, and burning with shame. Chapter 5. The Reckoning and Repentance. After the barbecue arson, Barbara plunged into a deep depression. Her cunning plans had not only failed, but had also backfired, leaving her with a broken arm, a cold, and burned down a swing. She felt humiliated, helpless, and defeated. Mike, not understanding her inner turmoil, continued to take care of her with astonishing persistence. He brought her hot tea with honey, helped her with her cast, cleaned the house, and even offered to fix the burned swing. "Barbara, I'll weld a new frame and we'll replace the wooden slats. It happens, don't worry," he said, comforting her. These words, spoken with such sincere concern, only intensified her feelings of shame and guilt. She began to realize that all her attempts to harm her son-in-law were absurd and foolish. She saw in Mike not just a handyman for hire, but a kind, caring person who was always ready to help. She remembered how patiently he had fixed her old stool, how he had helped her with the sauna, and how he had taken care of her when she was sick. And she realized that he didn't deserve her hatred. One evening, when Mike brought her another cup of tea, Barbara broke down. She looked at him and started to cry. "Mike," she whispered, "I'm so sorry. I've been such a fool." Mike, seeing her tears, was at a loss for words. He didn't know what to say. He simply sat down next to her and hugged her. "Barbara, don't say that. I love and respect you very much. Please don't cry." These words were like a balm to Barbara's soul. She felt forgiven and accepted. She realized that her revenge was a ridiculous, foolish play that had ended in complete failure for her. She decided that she would no longer seek revenge. She would live on, enjoying life and the company of her kind son-in-law. Chapter 6. A New Dawn. A month passed. Barbara had fully recovered from her injuries and cold. Mike, as promised, completely restored the swing, which now looked even better than before. Her relationship with her son-in-law had changed drastically. She no longer looked at him with contempt or malice, but with respect and gratitude. They sat on the porch together, drinking tea, discussing home repairs, gardening, and even grilling. Barbara, who had always considered herself a queen, now saw Mike as her good friend. One day, as they were sitting on the porch, Barbara looked at her new swing and smiled. "Mike," she said, "thank you for everything. You're such a kind and caring person." Mike, who was at the moment fixing an old garden cart, smiled back. "Barbara, you're welcome. It's my pleasure." They sat on the porch enjoying the peace and quiet. Barbara realized that her life had changed. She was no longer a queen waiting for admiration, but simply a woman who had found a good friend. She understood that love isn't always what you imagine it to be. and that sometimes it comes in the form of care, kindness, and respect. And that was far more valuable than all her old games. She had finally found happiness, and it wasn't at all where she had been looking for it. If you enjoyed the story, subscribe to the channel, and you'll hear even more captivating tales.